Morning in the mountains begins with a thin layer of mist covering the wooden house and the garden beds. The space is quiet, filled only with the gentle sound of wind and distant birds calling to each other. Trieu Duong opens the door and steps outside, carrying baby Truc Lam against his chest in a familiar cloth wrap. The warmth of his child slows his steps, as if he wants to hold on to this moment a little longer. The baby is still small, lying quietly, occasionally shifting with his movement. He says nothing, only takes a deep breath, feeling the morning air. A new day does not begin with urgency, but with presence. For Trieu Duong, the first task is not about how much he will do, but how he chooses to begin. And he chooses to start with calmness, carrying his child with him, stepping into work as a natural part of life. From the porch, Trieu Duong steps down into the garden behind the house. Rows of cucumber plants stretch across the ground, their green leaves still holding droplets of morning dew. He walks slowly between the rows, observing every small detail. Some cucumbers are ready to be picked, while others are still growing. He does not harvest immediately, but takes time to look carefully. Baby Truc Lam rests against his chest, breathing steadily, as if sensing the rhythm of his father's movement. There are no words, yet a clear connection exists. Trieu Duong bends down and gently touches the leaves, checking their freshness. Work does not begin with action, but with observation. For him, understanding the garden is just as important as working in it. Each day, the garden changes slightly, and he needs to notice it. Once he has chosen the right cucumbers, Trieu Duong begins harvesting. With one hand, he gently holds the plant, and with the other, he twists the cucumber to detach it. His movements are slow and precise, avoiding any damage to the plant. Each cucumber is placed into a bamboo basket beside him. The sound is minimal, blending into the quiet surroundings. Baby Truc Lam remains still, resting against his chest. Occasionally, he pauses to adjust the cloth wrap, making sure it stays secure. The work is not fast, but steady. He does not try to harvest as much as possible in a short time, but maintains a consistent rhythm. Each cucumber he picks is not just a product, but the result of time and care, and he understands that clearly. After harvesting enough, Trieu Duong carries the basket back near the house. He sorts through the cucumbers, removing those that are not suitable. Not out of strictness, but because he values honesty in what he sells. He secures the basket carefully, checking the ties multiple times. Baby Truc Lam remains calm, as if already used to these repeated movements. The surroundings grow brighter as the sun rises higher. He does not leave immediately. Instead, he stands for a moment, looking back at the garden, making sure everything is in order. Only then does he begin preparing to walk down the path to the market. The path from the house to the market is a narrow dirt trail winding along the mountainside. Trieu Duong carries his baby in front and a basket of cucumbers on his shoulder. Each step is firm, even though the ground is uneven. The sunlight grows stronger, casting patterns of light and shadow along the path. He does not walk fast, maintaining a steady pace to ensure his child's safety. Baby Truc Lam shifts slightly, then settles again. The only sounds are footsteps and the wind. The path is not far, but long enough to feel the effort. For Trieu Duong, this journey is not just about selling vegetables, it is part of daily life. When he arrives at the market, the space opens up, yet it still carries the quiet atmosphere of the mountains. There is no noise, no crowd, just a few simple stalls, each person sitting in their own corner. Trieu Duong chooses a spot near the path and places his basket down. He does not call out or advertise. He simply sits there, carrying his baby, waiting for those who need to come. A few familiar faces pass by and stop to talk. They do not just buy cucumbers, they ask about his life and the baby. Trieu Duong responds briefly and calmly. The act of selling happens naturally, without urgency. The cucumbers are exchanged little by little, not fast but steady. And within that slow pace, a quiet trust is maintained. While sitting at the market, Trieu Duong observes more than he speaks. Each person who comes carries their own story, yet no one rushes to tell it. They exchange a few simple words, just enough to understand each other. A woman buys a few cucumbers, hands over the money, and smiles at baby Truc Lam. A man stays a bit longer, asking about the harvest this season. Trieu Duong answers honestly, without adding or exaggerating. The conversations are brief, yet enough to create a sense of closeness. At times, Truc Lam opens his eyes, looks around, then falls asleep again. The market does not disturb him, perhaps because everything happens gently. For Trieu Duong, selling is not just about exchange, it is also a way to stay connected with others. When most of the cucumbers have been sold, Trieu Duong gathers his things and prepares to return home. He secures the basket once more, checks it carefully, and stands up. The path back is the same, but the sunlight has changed. The sun is higher now, shining directly onto the dirt road. His steps remain steady and firm. Baby Truc Lam sleeps peacefully, resting against his chest, unaware of the journey that just passed. There is no rush to return. Trieu Duong does not think about resting yet. He simply continues with what needs to be done. For him, a day is not divided into separate parts, but flows as a continuous rhythm. When he returns home, Trieu Duong does not stop for long. He sets the basket down and prepares food for the chickens. As he scatters the feed across the yard, the chickens quickly gather, creating small but lively movements. Baby Truc Lam shifts slightly, drawn by the sounds and motion below. Trieu Duong glances down at his child, then continues working. After that, he takes a watering can into the garden. Each row of vegetables is watered evenly, with water flowing gently over the leaves, reflecting sunlight. The work is familiar, repeated every day, yet it does not feel boring. Instead, the repetition creates a sense of stability. Each small task helps keep life moving forward. Evening slowly settles over the small house. The sunlight softens, casting a warm golden tone across the garden and yard. Trieu Duong stands in front of the house, reflecting on the day. There is nothing grand, no remarkable achievement, only familiar tasks: harvesting, going to the market, returning home, tending the garden, and feeding the chickens. Baby Truc Lam has been there all day, resting peacefully in his arms. Trieu Duong does not need to say anything or think too deeply. He simply stands still for a moment, looking at his child in the garden. The day passes quietly, yet feels complete in its own way. And perhaps it is these kinds of days that are worth holding on to the longest.
Hello mọi người, hôm nay mình sẽ trình bày câu chuyện về Toàn, một người đàn ông sống với những ký ức đã mất. Khi anh dần dần xây dựng cuộc sống của mình thông qua những công việc thường nhật, giản dị và sự chăm sóc thầm lặng của những người xung quanh. Dưới mắt theo dõi của một bà lão, Toàn đã bắt đầu thấy vững vàng trở lại. Dù câu hỏi về quá khứ vẫn tiếp tục làm anh trăn trở. Trung tâm của sự bối rối ấy là Tử Diễm, một cô gái trẻ tốt bụng và tận tâm, người mà sự ấm áp gần gũi của cô khơi gợi những tia sáng le lói của những ký ức bị lãng quên. Mặc dù anh không thể nhớ mình đã yêu cô ấy như thế nào, nhưng sự hiện diện của cô mang lại cho sự an ủi, hy vọng và khát khao lớn lao, muốn tìm lại cho con người mình trước đây. Qua công việc chung, những cuộc trò chuyện nhẹ nhàng, những khoảnh khắc bình dị tràn đầy ấm áp, Toàn nhận ra rằng sự chữa lành không phải là lúc nào cũng đến từ việc nhớ lại mọi thứ cùng một lúc, mà đến từ việc sống và yêu thương, tin tưởng những người luôn ở bên cạnh anh khi anh thấy lạc lõng nhất.